We have spoken at length about how we feel about the Switch, how consumers feel about the Switch, how consumers in Japan feel about the Switch, but what about developers? Well, we have a survey done by the weekly Famitsu magazine of 24 Japanese game developers asking questions regarding the Switch. Now, of course, I have been harping on and on about how important third-party support is for the Switch in particular because of its rather lackluster launch day and launch window game lineup. Of course, if they can get a bunch of support from Japanese and of course Western developers, then things are definitely going to improve on that front. Now, they were asked about prices, games in development, paid online, which features they found interesting, and so on and so forth. And what is interesting is that 54% of them said that they are currently developing games for the Switch, and 25% said that they are considering it, with 17% being no and the remaining 4% being declined to answer. Now, just because they're not working on one now, of course, doesn't mean they won't in the future, and there's 46% of developers who answered do plan on releasing games for Switch in future, and 46% are considering it. Now, what's interesting is that there were also questions about the price tag of the console. Now, of course, that's probably been one of the biggest points of contention about the hybrid console, but 67% of Japanese developers feel the pricing is actually appropriate, with 25% saying it's cheap and 4% saying it's too high. Now, of course, number 2 most contentious feature is undoubtedly the paid online. That possibly be number 1 to some people, but generally speaking, from the feeling that I've got, and I'd say general pricing is number 1, paid online is number 2, and 41% is say charging is unavoidable, and free was a better option if possible was 38%. So a pretty even split among developers when it comes to paid online. Now, the last thing that I want to touch on from this survey, and of course I will include the DualShockers article in the description below this video, which did helpfully translate the Famitsu article, and they were asked what they feel that the most crucial element is for the Nintendo Switch to be successful. You've heard my opinions over and over again ever since we learned what the Switch actually is, but of course these guys are in the industry, they're in developing games, they know way more about the Switch than we do probably. They've actually worked with the machine, a lot of them, and 34% believe that enriching the software is most critical, and a launch of a killer app is 34%. Now, other is 20%, so obviously a bit vague there, but it says interestingly got a pretty even split between the software and the launch of a killer app being the 2 most popular, and they're kind of similar, but one or a few killer apps can definitely sell a machine. Now, is Zelda good enough to do it by itself? Probably at the start, but obviously to continue a healthy life cycle for the console, you're definitely going to need more than that over its lifespan. So, as I said, the full survey and its results will be linked in the description below. Give it a read. It's interesting to get some feedback from Japanese developers. If a similar survey could be done of Western ones as well, we can definitely get a clear picture of how it's being received by all developers, that being, of course, the Switch. But, of course, to see how it is truly being received, we need only wait and see what happens with third-party support. As I've said before, that impressive list of third-party support doesn't really mean much because, well, we saw it with the Wii U and that quickly evaporated once it became apparent that that console was a nightmare to develop for. Hopefully that won't be the case with the Switch. I'm just saying that we shouldn't take that list as gospel just yet and wait to see what the future brings us. Hopefully we see more support from developers of the Switch because it is an interesting piece of tech. I just wish Nintendo would push it more as a handheld rather than a main console, because that is where its strength lies, at least in my opinion. Thank you very much for watching though, guys. I will see you next time.